Welcome to the Guide, Not Guru podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Brock. My purpose is to empower women to create authentic, aligned, and abundant lives. After over a decade of mentoring women in business and self-leadership, I found that we don't need to adopt a guru's blueprint. We need guides to help us build our own. So if you're ready to lead and be a work in progress, you've come to the right place. Okay, I have another amazing guest on the Guide Not Guru podcast today, and it is Brooke Weinstein, who is freaking brilliant, y'all. If you are someone who is wanting to be a more conscious parent and to build a relationship with your kids that is connected and healthy and peaceful and calm and balanced and joyful, then you're going to want to listen to today's episode, because Brooke teaches burnout parents to stop snapping at their kids through sensory and emotional regulation, and has amazing courses and products and things that we'll get into. But this is probably one of my favorite episodes that I'm most excited to interview someone, Brooke, because one of the reasons I've wanted to help myself is because of how I parent. Mm-hmm. My desire to figure out what's happening in me is so driven by the way that I've seen my negative unconscious patterns show up towards my children. I'm like, let me save myself so I don't recreate this in my babies. So Brooke, thank you for being on today. We're so excited.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yay. So tell everyone about you, like what you do, where you came from, your story, and how you became like this go-to person for burnout parents who really want to have this conscious parenting.
Sure. So hello, everyone listening. I am a doctor of occupational therapy, and I have done all the things and been all the places, I guess you could say. I started in pediatrics many years ago, and I started working in the hospital setting, and I knew I got into this field to impact the lives of children, like hands down. I found this in high school, and I was like, I know I want to do this. So I jumped right into the hospital setting, and it was like clients back to back to back to back. And I wasn't giving them the type of treatment I was longing for. I learned so much. I got to see every diagnosis, inpatient, outpatient, NICU, rehab, spinal cord injuries, like you name it, I got to see it. But I literally could not even make a doctor's appointment because I had back to back to back to back to back clients and so much paperwork. And I was like, wow, this model of practice is not working. So a very, very young clinician, I decided to leave the hospital setting and start my own practice with a business partner. And I wanted it to be different than what was out there in terms of educating the parents of like, look, this is what we're doing, so you can implement this into the home. And I did that for about 6 years, and it was still coming short of my long-term goal of impacting the lives of children the way that I was so longing to. Throughout that time of owning my business, I had 2 preemies of my own, and lots of shifts and changes within my own life. And I started waking up and looking around and being like, oh my gosh, like this cannot be my life. Like, how am I doing? Like, how did I get here? I've wanted all these things. I have babies. I have a husband. I have a business. Like, why is this not working? And why does this not feel good? So fast forward to my husband, Jonathan, getting a job in Texas. And I was like, no, I'm not selling my business. Like, what do you mean? Like I'm a badass woman who's got a career too. You know what I mean? I was like, home dog. And I sat with it for a little bit, and I was like, okay, am I happy? Is this what I want to be doing? And I recognized that all of like my peanut gallery, meaning family and friends, they were like, again, what are you doing? And I was like, everyone quiet, like just I need to sit with this. And I decided I was doing so much and doing everything that I wanted, right? Like most of your listeners and most of your clients are high performing women who probably are parents, if not longing one day to be that, right? Mm-hmm. And we think first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in the baby carriage. Oh, wait, but I'm a badass. So now I want to be a CEO and I want to do this. And like we hands down are badass and we get to have it all. But then once we finally get it all, we're like, oh shit, like, is this,
I can't handle it all.
my life? Like, what
I can't handle it all.
Right? Like, it's like, how did I get here? And so I could figure out enough to be like, let's do it. And my business partner, she wasn't happy, but I was like, look, this is what I have to do for my family. And up we moved to Texas. And during that time, I was able to kind of settle my kids. I took some time off and really figured out who I was, what went well in that business, what didn't go well, what I could have done better, what I felt I did do well, right? Like all the different things while getting settled here, as well as my husband was not doing well emotionally and learning, kind of seeing the parts and pieces of how all of this was playing out. And so I really got to see that as a stay-at-home mom, right? Like, we're exhausted, we're tired, we're snapping at our kids. Now then let's add a job and a high performance job to it. We're topping the charts here, right?
Yeah.
And so I recognized that, again, I was waking up and I was like, this can't be it. Like, this is not, like, this is like no one told me it would be like this. Like, what the hell's going on, you know? And so I started deep diving into trying to figure out not just how to be an OT and then a mom, right? It's another thing to figure out how to be a mom as an OT and do this in your home. And so I recognized that I was snapping at my kids. I was feeling burnt out, exhausted, depleted, all the different things, even after stepping away from my job. And I started playing and taking all the knowledge that I had and implementing it into my own home with both of my boys. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, holy shit, this is working. Like, oh my gosh. Now, it took a lot of trial and error, and my kids definitely were like, what are you doing along the way? But it worked. And what I saw was that I had, despite working with kids for so long and teaching them how to regulate their nervous system, I had never taken that information and applied it to myself.
Wow.
And learned how to apply it within my own home. And so that's what I've created in terms of, if you are feeling exhausted, like I said, depleted, tired, like your brain is spinning, maybe you can't turn off your brain, even that freeze mode, right? You're living in a dysregulated state, which long-term will lead to chronic illness, right? And so we have to learn how to get out of that fight or flight state, which is really producing so many negative hormones that our bodies don't need. And it's not meant to have that producing that hormone for an extended period of time. But if you've been patterning like that, right? Like, if when I was doing my whole career and I had the business and I was supporting Jonathan and all the different things, right? Like, I had to figure out like how to come down off of that and how to pattern that to stay there. And
can we just like pause there for a second? Please don't you dare not tell your whole story. But I want to pause here because like we have to slow down to that fact. We are often so unconscious of our lives. We think stress and chaos and exhaustion is normal. Like, we know we don't want it. We're like, ugh, I mean, I'm uncomfortable. But at least for me, I was in the beginning not conscious to the fact that the words you said, we have a pattern.
Yes.
Our life is set up in such a way that our body and mind is doing things that we weren't even experiencing. And I didn't have knowledge of this until I had my own personal burnout and breakdown of the body. Just like you said, I developed anxiety and depression. And all of a sudden I felt the word I said was dense. I would go to doctors and they'd be like, okay, they said it's anxiety and depression. That was a whole thing for me to accept because I was a high achiever. I was just like, no, like, look at me. I get up every day. I'm not in my bed. I'm not like, there was no trauma. So I remember saying, I feel dense, meaning like dumb, because I did not know why I was sick. I did not know why I was stressed. I did not know where it was coming from. I remember getting so mad at this counselor because she was like, has anything happened? What's going on? And I said, you tell me. I was like, I'm married to the love of my life. I have two healthy, beautiful children. I was not traumatized by my parents in these like big, blatant ways that would make sense to me to have emotional, mental, physical issues. I love my job. I'm purpose driven. It made no sense. And yet my body had manifested this sickness. So I just want to like note that, because sometimes we're so used to the dull, normal, meaning common life of sickness and exhaustion and all that stuff. We don't even see that we have a pattern of making this our reality.
Yep. 1,000%. And one thing I usually say in the beginning is, hi, I'm a preemie mom, I'm a doctor of OT, and I'm a widow, right? And that's just part of the story that we haven't shared yet. But like this manifested in Jonathan as anxiety and depression, and like severe anxiety and depression to the point where he took his own life. And it has rocked me, right? And having to, I guess, to contrast, like I have been through trauma, right? But I still had to learn how to move through the storm. And if I hadn't done this work on myself years prior, I do not, like hands down, I do not believe that my children and I would be able to support each other in the way we do and feel the way we feel and allow our feelings and allow our anger and support one another and get through this in such a hard yet healing way, right? Like I like to say the dust is settling, but in a really hard way, meaning we know how to do this. Like we know how to regulate our body and support our brains. And that's, I think, the biggest, and I know we'll talk about so much more, but the biggest takeaway from today is like your anxiety and depression is being demonstrated because your body and your brain is screaming, stop. Like, I need you to step on the brake. And usually us go-getter mamas, we're gas pedals, right? And so we train our brain to continue stepping on the brake, or excuse me, the gas. And if you think about it, like literally think about it, like how does it feel to rev that engine and step on the gas? It's like, vroom, you know, it's like, ooh, that feels good. But when you stay there, you're going to run out of gas. You're going to run out of gas. And so you literally have to learn how to throttle between the gas and the brake and recognize where to place that energy and where it serves you best.
And I love that, because I actually love that we have differing experiences in that way, because hard challenge life circumstances has shown up in two different ways for us. And yet we both needed the same solution. How do I support my body? How do I support my emotions? How do I bring what is happening on the internal? Because that's what's so hard. What was happening for your husband was happening for me. Is so under the surface. And so we can get by. We can, with our mind, present with a smile. We can do our jobs. We can whatever. And yet there's an entirely different underneath the surface experience that if it's continued to be suppressed and not paid attention to, it expresses itself one way or another. And then to watch you be able to take these skills and this knowledge and support yourself through life altering identity and life with you and your kids. It's just everything. So in hard times and in normal life, this skill set, y'all, around sensory and emotional regulation, it just excites me so much.
It's mental health. Like it's at the core of it, connecting, right? All of the conscious awareness that we are bringing to society. It's like body, mind, and spirit, right? Like this is teaching yourself literally how to connect the body and the mind. Like it's, you've got to be able to do it in order to then feel good. Like you have to, you have to listen to the cues, because what you're feeling, like the anxiety and depression that you at one point were feeling, that's your dashboard. That's saying engine, like engine light on, you know, and we're ignoring those cues to make the 50K months or to make the 100,000 months or to, I don't know, be the next Kardashian. I mean, I don't think I need to be that, but you know what I mean, right? Like, but to be the thing, and everyone is showing online that they are the thing. And it's a rat race of life. And it has been like 10x'd since COVID and lockdown, and we're all going to social media, but we have to recognize it's okay to do it, be the badass, enjoy it along the way, and have mental health, right? Yeah. And that connection to your soul and your spirit and your brain and your body.
So tell us how your life in this story has now led you to your purpose work. Because if you guys do not follow her yet on Instagram, not only is she a good time to watch, she is educational. She is passionate. She is so convicted in this message and getting it out to women and to parents. So tell us how this translated and what you're now doing. What's your mission?
Yeah. So I recognize that from doing all the work within my own home years ago, even before Jonathan passed, I recognized that this was the missing link in terms of how to impact the lives of children. If I'm sure you all listening here have heard of the word co-regulation, whether you know what that means or not, or all the different things, or know how to do it. Like, I'm sure you've heard it at some point now, right? It's starting to kind of get out in the universe. But if you are spinning on a hamster wheel and burnt out, exhausted, depleted, all the different things, that's what you're modeling for your children. And so the reason my business didn't work at a brick and mortar is because I'd say, hey, this is what we are working on. I need you to do, or can you do X, Y, Z at home? This is what it looks like. This is why we're doing it. And they're like, yeah. Like, I'm not faulting moms. Like, I've been there when I sold my business. Like, we don't have time for more homework for our children. That's why we're spending the money to bring our child to the expert, right?
Yep.
What I help you do is I help you become the expert, but it's not just on your child, right? Like, it's first on yourself. We have so many different ways of learning through hearing and reading and doing and experiencing. For sensory and nervous regulation, you have to feel it. You have to experience it to be like, holy shit, I know what that feels like now. Yeah. And so what I now do is I teach parents how to sensory and emotionally regulate their nervous system so that they can support their children. And the same method that I use on parents is I've made it, it's literally a model for children. Like, I did this with my kids, but now I teach it to parents, right? So then it's a one-stop shop between how to do this for yourself, but the steps to take, the framework is so easy and simple that that's the steps you'll take with your children to help them learn how to regulate their nervous system. And talk about sensory deprivation, right? Like, we're seeing more and more and more and more children with ADHD, sensory processing, and dyslexia. Like, we could go down that rabbit hole too, right? So this is needed for our children.
It's so needed. And I want to speak to this fact of the body and teaching the parents how to identify it and know it in themselves first. Because gosh, even me trying to teach my daughter how to tie her shoe, it's like, it's one other thing I have to do on my plate. Like, and I'm like, how did I do this again? Like, blah, blah, blah. But the minute you actually know something for yourself, you embody it, you are the example all the time. You don't even have to consciously try to do it. You are being it. And so when we can get something into who you are, practice habitually showing up being, it makes a difference. And Brooke, I did a podcast episode where I talk about all the time. So the women I'm usually working with are stepping into some moment of courage. Like, they're leaving an old life, they're stepping into a new life. And so I actually did a practice called Courage is the Tipping Point. And I took them into a meditation and I said, I want you to think about a time that you were courageous. Like, get into that memory in your mind and now notice how it's showing up in your body. And it was like, oh gosh, like, even right now, my heart is beating faster. My breath is getting shallow. I'm also feeling expansive and excited. I'm also like certain. I'm also like, no, like, all of a sudden, because I was able to connect the mind and the body. So y'all, if this is like resonating with you, all of a sudden, when you know it in your mind, you feel it in your body, you can make that connection. You'll know what courage feels like again, because you're like, oh yeah, wait, courage always feels scary and right at the same moment. I'm right there. So Brooke, does that like resonate with what you teach? You get them in such a mind muscle memory. Okay, good. Because I felt like that was it.
Totally. And I'm going to break it down in geek terms now. Are you ready?
Okay,
but I promise it'll be in layman's terms. Okay. So
good.
When you feel that, I love that you described that you were, I'm going to use the word slightly anxious, but yet excited, right? Like there was butterflies and like you're maybe starting to even like, ooh, get a little clammy, right? Like that's literally you stepping on the gas. That means you're stepping in, literally starting to step into fight or flight. And what stops us from doing the courageous thing over and over and over is because it's too scary. And the fear that we feel, we don't even recognize that fear is all that is hormones and your nervous system saying, is there a bear? Like, is this fight or flight? Like, do I need to run or like, am I safe? And every time you take a step and say, I feel it. I know that's fear. I got you, fear. Like, I got this. Like, hey, body, I'm safe here. I can sit in this. I can sit through this and I can get to the other side. That's creating resiliency within your brain and teaching and patterning your brain to say, hey, I'm not in fight or flight anymore. I got this.
Yep. And I think that's so good.
It all relates.
It's so good though, because again, I just did not have the educational knowledge around this stuff in the beginning. So all I knew is that my body was responding. And, let me give it in another example. Money has been a huge healing journey for me over the last 2 years. And I would wonder, why do I keep saying I'm going to do something and then not doing it? Well, it's because I was having an emotional nervous system response. So even though I mentally, consciously meant it, I'm like, I mean it. I did the goal poster. I wrote the affirmations. I did the thing. And yet my body would constantly resist because it would go into a state of fight or flight. And so I had to learn to create a space of safety of like, we feel this and we're okay. We feel this and we're okay. I'm safe. I'm safe. And then so expand it.
Like physical exercise, right?
Yes.
It's literally physical therapy or physical training for that part of your brain. It's like, nope, I'm safe. Nope, I'm safe. And little by little by little, it's like, oh, I got you. All right, let's go. Like what we got next on the list.
Yes. And so here's what's happening, parents. We're walking in the house. We're getting off a Zoom meeting in some emotional state that we're not even consciously aware of. And we're taking that same energy from this hard conversation you just had with a coworker or the stress of the launch that you're in, and you're walking out and embracing these perceptive, emotionally brilliant children who get so much information off of energy and emotions and things like that. And we're triggered and we're responding and we're reactive. And then later I found myself, Brooke, I remember I would find myself at night because my pattern, we talked about patterns. My pattern was I had no idea I was stressed. And then all of a sudden I would be yelling. I'd be like, can everybody just shut up? Like, everybody be quiet. And I knew in my mind, all I wanted to do is run away. So there was another pattern. I'm exploding. I'm wanting to get out of here. I'm wanting to flee the situation. And then at night I'd sit in bed and look at pictures of my babies and want to cry because I'd be like, I'm the worst mother. Like they're my world. Why do I act like this? And I could not wreck it out with myself. I was like, why don't I do what I want to do? But my body was beating me to the conscious moment. Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I would really call this the burnout cycle, which is a lot of what I teach in my course, Battling Burnout. And it's stage 1 through 4. And at stage 1, it's like you're the badass CEO, right? Who's going to Whole Foods and getting like, I don't know, the seaweed crackers and the non-GMO and no red dye, like all that. And you're like, I got this. Like I'm working out. I got my makeup on. Like I can do this forever. And then stage 2 is like, okay, all right. Well, like, self-care is slipping a little, but like, all right, I'm eating maybe the leftover macaroni and cheese on my kid's plate and like, but it's okay because like my kids are thriving. So like I got this. And then stage 3 is like, boom, you're there. You're screaming at your kids. You're like, everyone, like it's like I can't like I want to run away, right? And then what do you do after stage 4? Put your kids to bed. You apologize. You say, I'm sorry, mommy shouldn't have done that. And then you guilt and shame yourself and you say, okay, tomorrow I will do better. Tomorrow I will make it through. Like, why can't I keep it together? Why, like, I should be able to do this. And what we do is we cycle right back up to the beginning, right? And there's no break in that cycle. And we have to be able to understand what's going on from a nervous system level, right? So I've talked a lot about that gas pedal. I am a seeker. My brain craves input. I love working out. I love moving. I'm constantly moving in my chair. I'm literally standing on a balance board right now. Yeah. Like I have fidget toys all around me. I'm constantly moving when I'm sitting in my chair. Yeah. I have blue blockers on. Like I'm constantly doing things to regulate my nervous system so that when I do walk out that door, there's a fingers crossed chance that I'm not like, for the rest of the evening. Yeah. So if we understand how our brain and body ticks in terms of, are we an avoider? Do we avoid stimuli, right? Or do we seek? Do we crave it? And then we get burnt out because that's just our natural rhythm that our body craves it. Yeah. Like, do we oral motor wise, are we craving and then going into like emotional eating style of moving the jaw? Are we, strong sense, the clothing you wear? Like it all boils down to the stimuli around you and how can you support your individual nervous system to give you, no joke, the fighting chance of not stopping at your kids before they go to bed.
But that's so good because it's funny you were saying that. And I was thinking, Josh and I show up totally different in stress. Totally different in stress. And I mean, we're always like, what's wrong with you? And what's wrong with you? And we're like, what's wrong with us? Like, and it wasn't until, I really started, what's interesting, even me starting to learn how to regulate and support my own nervous system was affecting him because what was happening was I stopped being so reactive. So where we would usually participate in this anger dance, I stopped participating. So even if he was in his reaction, I wasn't putting fuel on the fire. So then all of a sudden we were coming to these calmer moments. We were going like getting conscious, having real conversations. And he has started to practice some of those things. I literally just wrote down like a note because I'm like, I need to tell Josh about this. Cause like, he doesn't know, he doesn't have the knowledge yet, but I've already seen me mastering this to the degree that I even am. It's affecting my home. It's affecting my marriage. It's affecting my children. And so like parents, even you helping yourself. And I know that's why you created your Thrive Like a Mother program, because if we can help the parent, by default, you will raise little people, teenage people, big people that will by osmosis be in a relationship with someone who is honoring their emotions and their feelings. So can you tell us about why that was important? Like what you've seen happen when we really take this on as a parent?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say my favorite, I love that you were talking about you and your husband, because my favorite thing to do is work with moms and spouses, right? Like whatever that looks like for you, because that way, like I literally can look at sensory profiles and I'm like, well, you probably this and you probably that. And they're like, and I'm like, they're like, you just met me. And I'm like, because it all does stem from that. But what I find with all of my clients is that best way to like sum it up is they get into the driver's seat of their life. They get into the driver's seat of their emotions and their body, their mental health. And 99% of the women that I work with and men, it's unbelievable. Their relationships expand and grow. And not to say that happens overnight, right? Like it takes a lot of time to even learn what's going on, be conscious of that, start patterning it. Like I wouldn't say to start trying to do this on your own, like find someone to help you figure this out. Yeah. But because it takes time, it takes effort. And I think that's, again, that immediacy culture of like, I want it right away. Right. But what I've seen with my families is kids who are struggling at school really understand how to request their needs now and really understand how to support themselves. And that's through my parents teaching their children how to do it. Kiddos who are kicking and biting and jumping all over the place, and your tornado, like if you have a tornado kid, right? Like their kids now understand how to support themselves. It does take time, right? But the parent also is like, instead of saying, why are you doing that? Like, why is my kid doing that? They're like, yep, see, yep, got it. Now I know, right?
Yep.
And so it helps. It's like a brain map, right? Like you very much finally figure out why we're doing what we're doing and how to support all of that along the way so that you can live in a cohesive dynamic that is very supportive to every single one of you within the household individually.
Yeah. And I think what's so important about that is it takes time and it takes educational experience because you could read a book on this and it would just stay top heavy. It would just stay in your mind. So the knowledge is important, but it's the knowledge implemented through experience that makes it real to your body. You're like, oh yeah, but I remember how I breathe, or I remember how fight or flight shows up, or I remember how it felt to go from anger to drop that emotion down when I used these tools. And understanding, getting educated around this is so important because like Brooke could give you all a bajillion tips today.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you understand why you're doing it and why it works and what it's doing, all of a sudden there's such a next level, like enrollment and like energy towards it. Cause you understand, like you just said, like, oh, that's why they're spinning on the floor, having a tantrum. They're trying to regulate their emotions right now. So talk to us a little bit about what is emotional regulation? Like literally, what is that?
Sure. So a lot of times, let's say you're dysregulated. Okay. Well, let's go back for a second, because I think this will help too, in terms of you all who are listening, understanding the difference between sensory regulation, right? Versus dysregulation, right? Or sensory processing. Yeah. So sensory processing is really, I'm looking out at the sky right now, right? I don't love a lot of light on. Yeah. So that's it. Like for me, visually, I don't like a lot of light. So there's light from the sky coming into my eyes. My brain is processing it. And then there's a response. Yeah. So let's say your kid drops a glass and you've just finished your last 5th Zoom call of the day and you're like, wah, right? It's sound. It's all the different things. You're on edge. So that is your brain literally processing the sound of the crashing brake. And then your brain, amygdala specifically, has a reaction. Okay. So when you are screaming Aunt Fanny, F all this stuff to your partner, it may be your amygdala. It may not be your personality. So maybe you don't need to shame yourself, right? It may just be your brain and that engine light coming on. Okay. So when you are at the snapping point, when you are screaming all the things, that is when you're like, okay, I'm dysregulated, right? I am so overly stimulated from all the stimuli around me that now I'm in a state of dysregulation, which is basically fight or flight, right? And how it shows up is like brain fog and forgetfulness and snapping at your partner and all the different things where you start to feel like you're not functioning very well.
Yeah. And it was funny, that would showed up in lots of different ways, but it would show up as my inability to sleep at night, couldn't turn my brain off. I'd be like, I'm physically exhausted, but my mind is wired. I'd had too much sensory overload throughout the day. I had not released or limited that sensory. I hadn't moved some of those emotions through me. So I was like, why can't I sleep? Then I'm waking up exhausted. I'm even more reactive tomorrow. I'm again, those body responses coming in, you know, it just, if we're not aware of it, we're constantly accumulating and then like even more reactive and even more dangerous in our relationships with the people that we love most. And I'm curious. So I took a test 2 years ago and found out and have continued to study and understand it, that I'm a highly sensitive person. And at first, when I looked this up, it's if anyone's interested, you go to hsperson.com and Elaine Aaron has all the research about it. But when I first heard that, someone was like, I think you're highly sensitive. And I was like, it triggered me because I was like, people have always told me I'm an emotional and it's not that I'm even emotionally unstable. what I found out was I'm processing so much information faster than I even have consciousness. It's one of the reasons I found out that I'm even prone to people pleasing, because if I walk in the room, I've taken in so much information about what's here. I know what to do and be in order to be safe. So a lot of our children, we are taking in so much information that's if we don't understand how to help ourselves, can cause us to show up in ways that we're not wanting to be. So tell me about HSP and highly sensitive person, because I know one of my children is also. I'm like, that makes so much sense. But tell me more about that.
I love that you brought this up. So we won't go down the rabbit hole of like
diagnosing
and all the different things, because I could totally go down. But like, I would say more of us are highly sensitive than we ever recognized or care to admit. And what bothers me today is that we have put labels like ADHD and ADD back then was just like when I was, I don't know, in second grade, third-ish grade, they said that I had ADD, not ADHD, but ADD. So I truly believe that if I were a child now, I would be now diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. Sensory processing disorder was not even around when you or I were growing up. And that is the issue that I have, is that I believe I'm a highly sensitive person. That's it, like bottom line, which means you have a very sensitive nervous system. Same with a lot of kiddos who are being diagnosed with ADHD and sensory processing disorder. And my biggest thing is like, if so many of us have it, why is it a disorder? Maybe it's just the way we all function, right? And we have the ability to support it. So if you feel like you have a child, right? I kind of talked about that tornado in the house, like that kiddo. Or if you feel like you are highly, highly sensitive, and that's a phenomenal book, phenomenal test, all the different things, can't say enough great things about it. That just means, if you take it a step farther in terms of that's more the psychological piece of like, I'm a highly sensitive person. What it means is that you have a highly sensitive nervous system. So what it looks like is the kids who have super big reactions to things that you're like, what the fuck? Like, just put your damn shoes and socks on, like get in the car, like you're going to a birthday party. I don't understand, right? Like that, it's those kids. The ones who have a hard time sitting in their seat. Me, I'm on a balance board right now, right? Like all of the different things. It doesn't mean that we're broken. It just simply means that, great, now I have the awareness. Now I know that I feel things so much bigger and grander than maybe others. That doesn't make you broken. And that doesn't mean that you have to be fixed. It just simply means, okay, like now I can support this. And I may need a little bit more support than Joe Schmo who can jump back like that. Again, it doesn't mean I'm broken. It just means that's what I need for me to support myself, my brain, and my body to function in a very happy state. Yeah.
And what was interesting, so just, I don't even think I've shared with you, Brooke, but over the last like 7 months or so, I had an adrenal crash at the end of summer, and I was like crashing, like I have to go to bed right now. Like I have no more thoughts. I have no more energy, like body crashing. And I've been a CrossFit, coach, and I've been moving my body and I lead these things. And I had mental fog. Like I could not believe how, like I've heard mental fog, like anyone who's watching the video, it's like air quotes, mental fog. Like, no, I could not hold a thought. I could not complete an outline to a program. I could not get my lessons plans together. I could not do my job. And as I started looking, again, researching, like, where did the sickness and illness in my body that manifested happen? And I looked at my last year. Josh and I, we were in such a year of like, we're flying free, we're following our calls. And as I would not change it for the world, but I was in a fight or flight for 8 months. My nervous system was so unsupported that it was like, I'm never safe. I'm never safe. I'm never safe. I'm never safe. And so it's manifested into this illness that now I'm saying, how do I support this version of me? There's a sensitive, empathetic, beautiful version. So y'all, this is why I was so excited about Brooke being on here, because especially for the women that I work with. I teach a lot of high achievers, and I see a lot of courses and programs that it is sexy to drive. It is sexy to go hard. It's sexy to take the risk and to accelerate and all those things. And I'm not for courage and taking those steps. But what they're not doing is supporting the female who's living her own life in her nervous system. And I'm like, that piece is missing. And this education is so important, not only for your work, but then the experience you're bringing home. So yeah, this has been very fresh and real for me.
I love that. Like, and that's so brave of you to share that. I think, especially with lockdown and COVID, we were all like, all right, let's do this. Like, here we go. And there is so much like, you can make more, you can do more, you can be, like I said earlier, like the next Kardashian, because you can see so tangibly what it looks like now that there's so many reality TV shows and so many social media people showing off their homes and their bling, right? Like it just is in our face. And so I very much ramped up, and I knew I would, right? So for me, everything relates to threes, and I talk about it a lot on my podcast, but basically I knew that the transition of being in a widowhood state or moving through the state of grief, I knew it'd be 3 years, right? So let's say you're going back to school from winter break. That's going to be a transition of about 3 days, maybe 3 weeks, depending on a highly sensitive kiddo, maybe not, right? So check in with like the 4th week. I give all of my clients the homework. The one and only homework I give them is a 3-hour selfish day of like, I need you to take 3 hours, and I need you to see how you feel the moment you leave. And I need you to see how you feel when you walk back in the door. So the first hour is usually like, oh, I can't forget to do this, and I got to do this, and Jimmy's got soccer practice, and I got to do this and that for work and all the things. The second hour is kind of like, I don't know what the heck to do with myself. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. And like, go do the fun things. Yeah. Book some stuff, go get a massage, do whatever you want, but it has to be 3 hours. And by the third, you've moved through so much stuff and processed so much and supported yourself. And that feels like regulation. Yeah. And so it's so important to go after your dreams, but what is the rush? Like, you've got to learn how to enjoy it along the way, right? Like if you have these goals, and I did, like I was saying, my first year after Jonathan passed, I was like, I can do it. I'm going to make $1 million this year. Like, I'm going to do it. Like that's the goal. Like, I can do it, because I was like, all right, I'm the one and only here financially now. And like, I want to do this fast so that I can be with my kids. And midway through the year, I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Right? Like, your adrenal just like failure. That's literally your car at this point with the engine light on the side of the road. You've already called AAA. You're steaming out the front, and you're waiting there for 3 hours because AAA is on their way, right? Like, that's where you were at. And what is the point of making the bazillion, gajillion dollars if you're not enjoying it along the way? So have the goals, but instead say, where do I want to be when I'm this age? Like, where am I going to be when my kids are 10? Where am I going to be when I'm, for me, my individual goals are like, I can't wait. Like, I literally say this as an affirmation, let's say, right? Like, I can't wait to see where my business is when I'm 40. I can't wait to see where my business is when Charlie's 15. Like, holy shit, I cannot imagine. And so it takes the micro, right? Like just like taking all of it and looking directly at the to-do list and saying, let's zoom out. Like, let's zoom out and let's kind of say, where do I want to be one day? And it's okay to expand that and say, I'm going to go slow here, and I'm going to have some mental health. And it's not a race. It's not a race. And we all have beautiful things to share. We all have things to learn from one another. If you are called to do something for yourself or support others, you have a gift. You have a special gift that no one can take away from you and you alone. And so trust in that and know that there is no rush, and you can do it to the point where you truly can. It takes work, right? But you truly can find that balance. You can. It's effort, but you can. Yeah.
And so you spoke to sensory. Tell us a little bit more about emotional regulation, and what would that look like if everyone's leaning in and like, okay, how do I see it? What steps do I take? What does that look like?
Yeah. So within the method that I teach, it's basically 4 steps that are connecting all the different portions of the brain. Okay. So the first step is, how do I feel, right? Without shaming those feelings. Yeah. And it's going back to that and patterning that over and over and over and over. That's the emotional regulation piece, is the allowance of those emotions. And then we move through the parts and pieces of, where do I feel it in my body, right? The emotions and connection to the body. And then what do I need? And then how do I go get it? And that's the whole owning your voice piece. And right. But it's connecting the frontal lobe with the amygdala. Like it's connecting all the different things and using it in real time when it matters most. Like, okay, how do I feel right now? Are my shoulders raised? Is my jaw clenched? Am I eating a bag of Doritos tonight because I've got a lot on my mind, or am I actually hungry and want these Doritos, right? Like, it can show up in every single moment of your life, but you have to become aware of the emotions to then support that regulated piece of the emotion of being like, okay, like, it's okay to be here and it's okay to feel this.
Give me an example of you using this in real time recently, because I'm actually smiling. I'm like, oh, yay, I do that exact thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
Give us an example how that has shown up for you lately.
Sure. So I would say one of the biggest, I'll give you an example that I use a lot, and I've been there before. Okay. And a lot of my clients have. One of the biggest ones is like, you've made it through the day, but then you're at bath time and your kids think it's like a beach day. Like, they're like splashing everywhere and enjoying everything. And like, I don't know about you, but my bathrooms are echoey. Like, it's a pain in the butt, and the lighting is just shitty, and it's small, and I don't want to be in there, to be quite honest. So I used to be like, enough, like, get out. Like, years ago, I'd be like, that's it, we're done. And our kids are just having fun. Like, they're doing nothing wrong. Right. And so if I can say, okay, I know that the sound in there is completely dysregulating, and the lights, I can take a step back to where I'm in the little area where they brush their teeth, but I can see through the door that they're alive and safe, right? Or I can put loops in my ears, or I can lower the lights to try and have a calming bath, or I can do the bath at a different time. But allowing yourself in real time to say, even let's say you snap, let's say you're like, enough, like, get out the tub, whatever it is. Let's say you do it. At some point, I want you to be like, okay, how do I feel right now? Because usually it has nothing to do with them, right? And so we have to take responsibility and say, okay, got it. This is me. Like, I didn't make the sale, or I didn't, whatever it is for you, right? Like, all right, I didn't meet or, I'm on my period, or like, whatever it is. Okay, got it. Like, I see this. Okay. Hey guys, mommy's feeling really frustrated today. I really need some help, right? So then we can take steps to support ourselves. And that's where the driver's seat comes in, of like, it's okay to tell your kids you're not doing well. It is okay to tell them how you feel and model that. The first time I showed my kids what I use zones of regulation. So blue, green, yellow, red, right? Mommy's on blue. Eli was like, Mommy, are you on blue? And I was like, yeah. And I was like crying. And he was like, Charlie, Mommy's on blue. And I was like, I'm just sad for today. And like, I will never forget that moment, like ever. They like wrapped their arms around me, and I just boo-hooed, and I told them how hard this is to do it on my own. And it shouldn't have been just the 3 of us, but we're going to get through it. Like, I just like let it out. And they're like, it's okay, Mom. It's okay. Like, we love you. Like, it's okay to be sad. And like, that's what I model to them, is it's okay to be sad. And that's the biggest thing that I feel we push down, going kind of full circle to like you saying, I'm a highly sensitive person. If you were told your entire life that you're highly sensitive, or you're highly emotional, or like you were told to stop crying, or you just felt like you always had these emotions, and so you needed to like numb them down or push them down, it's super hard to start showing up for yourself in that way and start finding that voice to be like, I feel sad, and damn it, I'm not too much. Like, it's okay to be angry. Like, it is okay to be sad. And like, I'm going to own that. It's hard to do. And it takes time, patience, love for yourself and effort.
It's so good. I have just a whole deep exhale because on the emotional intelligence scale, I'm prone to go to shame. I'm prone to go to shame. And so it means I make who I am and what I'm feeling wrong. And it's not that thing is wrong. It's I am wrong, right? Guilt is saying I did wrong. Shame says I am wrong.
Yes.
And there's so many times when we make our kids' big emotions, we make our big emotions, which are human experience emotions. Like if you think of the pulse, it's high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. This is called life. And I think sometimes we get it wrong that to be in a purposeful life that we're not going to experience negative emotions. That's just a part of the life journey. Now, how many we stay in, that's a sign. That's something you should pay attention to if you're constantly in a negative emotion. But highs and lows, gosh, especially for a female, every week we're a different human. Our body looks different. Our emotions are different. And so when we make big feelings wrong, what we are telling ourselves and telling our children is that you are wrong.
Yes.
You are bad. You are.
Stop that.
Stop that
down.
And
yes.
Exactly.
It's not okay to feel that.
Exactly. And often it's we can't be with their feelings. I remember my daughter felt embarrassment one day and I told Josh, I was like, I have to go outside. I am feeling so overwhelmed right now. I could not even support her in that moment because I was triggered by my own experience of female criticism or whatever it was in that moment. And so it's just so beautiful to my friends listening. Please show your children you're human. There are so many times I've done that exact same thing, Brooke, where I've just been like, mommy is feeling blank. Mommy needs this right now. I'll be right out. And so it's been beautiful to watch Everly and Rainer start to use those words
exactly.
Mommy, instead of saying, and even switching the language, instead of Everly, she won't say, I am angry. She's saying, I'm feeling angry. So she's not even owning anger. She's saying, I feel this. It's this disconnection.
What you need.
It's been powerful. Yeah.
Yep. And that comes with time. I would say in the beginning when I started doing this, Charlie took it on a little. I was like, I feel angry. And I recognized that I would have to say things just in the beginning, they get it now in terms of, I'd say it has nothing to do with you, mommy just feels angry. I'm not angry at you. Right. And so we have to be able to allow ourselves to be human. And there's a difference between snapping at our kids and saying, stop doing that, or that's too loud, or all the different things versus saying, I feel really overstimulated right now. I feel really frustrated. I feel really stressed out. I feel how do you feel? Right. And to be able to model that to our children is such a gift because I look at it as, for me personally, let's say, I used to, the goal was that I would want my children to be able to go up to a bully on the playground and say, hey, I don't like that. I feel frustrated, right? I need you to back up. That's what I wanted from my boys. Go get him, slugger, right? And now I unfortunately know that my children have a higher risk of mental health and depression and even suicide for them, right? And so it is a non-negotiable in my family for them to understand how to regulate their nervous system, for them to be able to know the safety of mommy, I feel really unhappy right now, or I feel really sad right now, or I feel really angry right now. And the ability to share that and say that is the emotional intelligence and the emotional regulation piece that I would say 99.9% of us love you parents, but 99.9% of us, we didn't get that growing up from our generation of parents. Not saying they were bad. It's just, this wasn't there.
Wasn't there.
They didn't know how to do that, right? Yeah. So it's so important to allow these emotions. They're not bad. And the last thing I will say is the shame and guilt. There's literally no benefit to your brain to shame and guilt. Literally there's zero benefits. It's not it's not like, oh, well, if you shame yourself a little, you like, there's literally nothing. So it's like, all right, well then, all right, I just screamed at my kids, like, but I'm not going to shame myself because that's not great for my brain. Like, allow it and just be like, well, it was a moment. It wasn't a decade. It wasn't a day even. It was a moment. And like, I am a really damn good parent, right? And just, you accept it rather than shame it.
And to wrap this up, for me, one of the things that's been so powerful about learning about this has been not only to be the example in front of my kids, but to empower them with this, because what we want as parents is that they would be capable to be humans by themselves one day. Like that they're going to be okay when they're, and so if they have these skills, life's going to happen to them just like it's happened to us. And all of a sudden I can trust their resiliency to handle the hard that will happen with life, because they have the most beautiful tool set of language, body, understanding, communication, like all those pieces. So that for me has been so empowering to say, like, we are building this resiliency and capability in our kids by getting it wrong, and correcting it, getting it right, repping it out. Like, I've stumbled into this and it's also wonderful. Like, let them see you stumble and course correct, because they will need that example.
Yes. And not to say, like, last piece is, just because you're allowing your children to feel their feelings doesn't mean that you're ripping away all boundaries, right? Like I've said, like, stay in the driver's seat. It is okay to still have boundaries, but parent this way and allow them to have their emotions, but still set boundaries in terms of, I need their brains to feel what it feels like to have a natural consequence, even of like, yep, that's not something we can do. And so I need your brain to feel this so that you know it's not okay to run in the middle of the street or something, right? Like, it's okay to still have boundaries in parenthood, even doing the emotional work of being conscious and regulated and all the different things.
I love it so much. Brooke, thank you for being on today. Tell everyone where they can find you and some of the programs and ways that you support parents in this work.
Sure. You can find me on my Instagram page. It's Brooke Weinst, Weinst. They did not have all of Weinstein. Someone else has it.
Darn.
I know. And I work with parents one-on-one. I work with parents in a group setting that's called Thrive Like a Parent, where you get to know other moms. I have on-demand courses for any parents who are super busy and want to learn this, but yet don't have time to come to all the classes and all the things. As well as I have a podcast that I dive deep into, a seeker versus an avoider, and how to do the tantrums and the meltdowns. Because yes, there's a difference, and like all the different things. So, the podcast is called Thrive Like a Parent as well. So that's all.
And you mentioned that you have a burnout quiz. Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So if you're like, I don't know if I'm burnt out, DM me and be like, hey, I heard you. I would love to get this quiz, and it's free. And you can see kind of how that relates, right, to stage 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're in stage 3 or 4, it's for sure some time for some support.
I love it. Brooke, thank you so much for being on here and like bringing us to this point of awareness. And my friends, if you're listening and this resonated, please lean in and connect with Brooke, because she is a source of wealth of knowledge, entertainment. Please. I love it so much. And
you
also
gotta make it fun.
Change. I know. I love you so much. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Hey friend, thank you for listening. My goal is to empower as many women as possible. If this episode supported you in any way, I would love it if you'd leave me a review or let me know on Instagram. You can take a screenshot or tag me or just shoot me a DM. If you're looking for any kind of additional support, don't hesitate to reach out. See you here next Tuesday.